Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent Podcast. I'm Jason Abrams, and this is the place where we lift the curtain on the world of real estate like never before. Every week, I sit down with visionaries, pirates, and mavericks. We're here to document, demonstrate, and most importantly, demystify their game-changing models and systems. What secrets propel them to the top? And how are they living their dreams? This is about passion, it's about strategy, but above all, it's about real, tangible success. So buckle up and let's dive in. This is the Millionaire Real Estate Agent Podcast. Are you a good negotiator? How do you know? How do I know? How do your clients know that you're a great negotiator? What's the proof? And by the way, what have you taken? What classes have you taken? What books have you read? What podcasts have you listened to? What model are you running? Friends, all too often, we don't have a good answer to any of those questions. You know who does? Mike Zinicola does. Friends, on this show, we are going to unpack the Easy Sales Team. They do over 1,000 units a year, and Mike told me that the secret sauce, the key to this business, is that they have a very specific model around negotiating, and it begins with a special letter that they write. We're going to give you all the details. We're going to unpack it from start to finish and tell you exactly how to do it. Sit back and buckle up. This is Mike Zinicola. Mike, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Jason. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic. So I want to unpack it with you because 1,100 units a year, $325 million. You got 130 some odd agents on the team. I mean, you're living just a giant business, but no one starts that way. Mike, what's your journey into the greatest industry of the world?
Well, actually, I got my law license in 1983.
Okay, stop the tape. You're a lawyer? I had no idea.
I practiced law for 17 years before I did this.
Okay.
And I went to law school to get involved in politics and then realized in my second year of law school, I would never want to be in politics. But I was already in my second year of law school, and that's how I became a lawyer.
Wow.
And I did it for 17 years. The first 5 years, I was a family law attorney. And you just can't do that forever. So I had to get out of that. I had some clients who were real estate investors. And I started getting involved in the real estate. And I did that for many years. And I had some other companies that I owned with some of my partners, some renovation companies and things like that. And I realized at the end of the 90s that I was more interested in being involved in the deal, not necessarily negotiating the subrogation clause on page 47 of the contract. And I had a couple of clients that, quite frankly, I didn't like. I always felt I was on the wrong side of the transaction representing them.
Wait a second. No one walks away from a career that long to go into the unknown.
I had one incident with a very large commercial developer who had a lot of properties in Northeast Ohio, where I'm from. And I had just had enough. I didn't like how they treated people. And I was an arm of treating people badly. And I just needed to do something different. And so I didn't just wake up one morning and say, oh, I'm going to go be a realtor. This was coming on. And finally in 1999, I said, I've had enough. With my knowledge and with my background in real estate law, I would be able to sort of be ahead of the class a little bit in terms of my business. For 2 years, I worked for a real estate investment trust. I was an attorney in their acquisition department. So I helped them put together the packages to buy $30 million buildings. And so I knew that negotiations would be something that I would be very good at. And that's actually helped me a lot. And I was fortunate because I had a law practice. I had enough money in the bank that I didn't have to worry about it. I figured if I didn't make $1 for 2 years, I wouldn't have to change my lifestyle. So because of that, I was in a position to make that leap into the unknown. But to be honest with you, the first year in my practice, I did 44 open houses and I sold 13 houses.
Yeah.
13 houses, a lot of houses to sell, right out of open houses to strangers.
Yes.
And so when I got into real estate in the year 2000, I realized after 3-4 months that thank God I made the change.
You read the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book at some point.
Of course.
And this had a big impact on you.
Right. You know what I credit Keller Williams for more than anything? The notion of unlimited thought.
What does that mean?
It means when I came here from my regional brokerage, I had worked there for 7 years, and it was in 2008 when I came to Keller. My whole idea was, what if I could build a team that could beat this woman, Gloria, who was the #1 agent on the west side of Cleveland, and she did $35 million. What if I could just beat Gloria? And I come to Keller, and I come to the first family reunion. Both Greg Erlinger, my business partner, we both came to Keller the same day. And part of that was coming to 2008 family reunion in Atlanta. And we go into this breakout session, and it was Russell Rhodes was teaching it. And Russell had sold $150 million the year before. And we're like, $150 million? That really beats Gloria. And we went to this breakout session, and Russell says, you know what? If you're going to build a team, you need to lock yourself in a room and make a list of all the things you're bad at or that you hate. And you need to figure out how you're going to either partner up with that or hire it. And we left there and we realized that both of us were really good at different things. Greg is the marketing social media guy, and I am the practice of real estate guy. And if we put our talents together, we'd have an unfair advantage in the marketplace. Because you're either me or either him.
Gary once told me, by the way, if you're new to the show, when we reference Gary, we're talking about Gary Keller. He, together with Jay Papasan and Dave Jenks, may he rest in peace, they wrote the book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, which of course is the namesake for this show. Gary told me, Mike, he said, when you're sitting next to other top agents in any room, you might be sitting next to your future business partner. But you're definitely sitting next to someone who can refer you business. And so it kind of changed the way that I thought about hanging out with other real estate agents.
Right. Especially on a national basis. Because there's different things in different cities, and you say, oh my God, I never thought about that. And it might be something that's commonplace in Seattle.
And that's exactly right. I think that's why this show appeals to so many top producers all over the world, because we're literally sharing unabashedly with each other.
Right.
So for you, that's the practice of real estate, which I got to tell you, if I didn't know you, it would sound a little out there, maybe a little airy-fairy. How do you actually go and monetize that? But you're about to get really specific on how being an expert negotiator and practitioner is the value for real estate agents.
Right. So I have a very specific way of negotiating. I actually write deal letters, just like I did when I was working for the Real Estate Investment Trust, and I used to help them buy $30 million buildings. So as a good negotiator, when I was in the Real Estate Investment Trust, we might put an offer together, a letter of intent. We might send over like 60 pages of information as to why we're offering $27 million instead of $32 million. And there was always a deal letter that went out with it. And so I've come to residential real estate, and that didn't happen. When I started, we used to make oral presentations at the person's kitchen table. And we used to tell them why they should take our offer, why our offer is the best. And then somehow in texting and then sending it over or downloading offers or Dotloop and DocuSign, somehow the whole idea of negotiating went out the door. The whole idea of defending your offer went out the door. So I continue that. And instead of sitting at the kitchen table, I write a 2 to 3 page letter about the deal. And you asked before, how does that increase your business? I have people who call me and refer business, and they'll say, he'll write a letter with your deal. He just doesn't present it. He'll write a letter. And Jason, can I tell you my greatest phone call in 25 years as a realtor?
Please.
I sold a house in North Royalton, Ohio. And when they wrote their offer, they wrote $550 on $625. And after I was done with them, they paid $615 for the house and moved on. 12 years later, I get a call from the buyer who was not my client. and said, Mike, you don't remember me probably, but I bought such and such a house. And when I bought this house, the seller had a much better realtor than I did. And could you list my house? Because we don't want you on the other side.
I love that. That's so good. Unpack this letter for me. I'm out there and I'm going to submit an offer.
Okay.
What is this letter all about?
Well, first of all, it's not a love letter. We don't discuss my 3 kids would really love to play in the backyard. That is not what this letter is about. This letter is about saying why my offer is better than anyone else's. Can I give you an example of one that really worked very well?
Please.
I had a client who was a CPA. Now, they're all about the numbers. And this was a $795 listing. And he and I could not figure out how this is worth anything more than $750. It just wasn't. And he was a cash buyer. And so I delved into the comps, but nothing had sold in this development for over a year and a half. In anticipation of writing this letter, I went to the listing agent and I said, the last 18 months, what would you say the average appreciation in the city of Westlake was? He told me 7%. And if you took the comps from 18 months ago and you multiplied it by 1.07, you came up with about 750. So I was in multiple offers, but my guy said, I'm only paying 750. I'm not going any further, and we'll just look for another house because I'm not overpaying. That's just who he was, and I wasn't going to get it. But here was the beautiful thing. I knew who my audience was. My audience wasn't the seller. The seller was dead. My audience was the trustee who was a banker. That banker just wants to go to work every day, come home and go home to his kids and have a nice life. So I wrote a letter that basically stated my client is basically cash. They're excited about owning the house. We've really done extensive research on the numbers, and we really feel this is the right offer. And let me tell you why. And then I went through the old comps, and then I said, the listing agent told me that properties in this area have appreciated 7%. And so if you add the 7% on, you come up with 750. So Mr. Seller, Mr. Trustee, you might get better offers than mine, but they also better be cash because you're not getting an appraisal. So if there's no appraisal gap guarantee and they're getting financed, you're not going to do better than my offer.
I love that. So as I'm listening to this and I'm taking the notes, by the way, friends, you don't have to take the notes. I'm taking the notes today. You can go to MREAnotes.com and sign up for them. They come out every Thursday. Here's what I'm getting, Mike. Step 1 is kind of know your audience.
Right.
Meaning that you're not always just talking to a seller. There may be other interested parties. Is that right?
1,000%. And the next is talk to the listing agent and find out about the seller. Find out who they are, what they're doing. And a lot of times agents won't tell you, and a lot of times they will. So for instance, remember that deal I told you where they started at $550 and we got to $615? One of the things that agent told me was they were moving in from Connecticut. And they loved this house because there was a stream in the backyard and no houses behind it, just like their home in Connecticut. So in their letter, I would say, I know you want to buy this house. It just reminds you of home. And I did put that stuff in there. So I always try to get feedback. So as a buyer's agent, if I'm offering feedback, it's going to be generic. It's not going to be specific. And as a seller, I'm going to ask for as much as I can so that I have that information because I'm always anticipating writing this letter.
I love that. I think that's so smart.
If a buyer sends me an offer, I don't say, oh my God, that's so low. Forget it. We're not offering. I say, thank you so much for your offer on the house. I know you're going to love the house, and I'll say a few things about that. And I'll say, unfortunately, we can't sell it to you for $575. And let me tell you why. So I just don't say that. I tell them why. My client can't walk away because these are the comps. Or if I'm representing the buyer, you know what? Those are the comps. But in order for me to get there, I have to redo the kitchen, bath, and basement. And so I have a list of things when I have the buyer that I'm going to do. And I explain to them what I'm going to do. I'm explaining to them, to bring the house up to the market that you're using as comps, I'm going to have to do all these things. And that's going to cost $70,000, which is why I'm only going to offer you this much because we want this house. But we can't afford to be underwater on day one, or we can't afford to be underwater when we finish the renovations that need to be done.
Well, and that kind of talks to step number 2, because knowing the audience is number one. And that's often going to come from interviewing either the listing agent or the buyer's agent to try to get as much info as you can.
Right.
Number two is going to have to be do the research. So let's talk about comps for a second, Mike. When you're doing the research, are you looking at sold properties? Are you looking at active properties? Because there's this age-old debate. Do I look at what happened or do I look at what's happening? How do you think about it?
When I look at comps for the purpose of this letter, I look at solds.
Why?
Because those are the numbers that people actually paid for a house. When I look at comps for the purpose of listing a house, I look at both solds and actives, because when you're listing a house, you're talking about who am I competing against right now? When you look at that and who am I competing against right now, those are all the active listings. Because people are going to be in the MLS and they're going to be saying, well, I can get 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths over here, or we can have Mike's listing as 4.5, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. Well, I have to be competitive with all of those. So I look at active listings for lists, but for the actual negotiation letters, it's only closed.
Okay, this makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
The next step sounds like really know your strong spot. Meaning you mentioned if I'm paying all cash, that's an asset for my client.
Especially when a listing is overpriced.
100%. So once I know the audience and once I do the research, am I just taking inventory of what makes my offer strongest and I'm making my list?
And you also say things in the letter that everyone assumes, but it's another point. For instance, I always put in my letter, luckily my seller doesn't have to sell their home to buy your house. Well, that's a given, but it's another positive point.
Yes.
About your offer. So that always goes in there. I've always say my clients looked long and hard and they did the analysis, because if I'm offering something low, I don't want the client to think that I'm just a lowballer seeing what I can get. Everything I write is very sincere. I always end it, please accept our offer in the sincere fashion that it's being given to you. It's one of those things that just makes people know. And then there's little things. I once got a deal. These are Cleveland numbers. The list price was $239. I got the house for $208. And I went through everything, all the renovations we're going to do, and I did everything. There was a PS on the bottom. We noticed that there was a headstone for your pet in the backyard. My clients are pet people as well, and we promise you that that will not be disturbed for as long as we own the house. I promise you. That added.
There's no question.
There's no question.
And that's kind of this fifth step. So I have to know my audience.
Yes.
I got to do my research. I have to make my list and know what makes my offer strong. Then I have to have facts, not fun. I'm not just writing a love letter. I'm writing a factual letter. I got all the steps now, and I have the salutation at the end of the letter. How do you actually deliver it? Are you sending this over in an email package and then hoping they read it? Are you calling them and taking them through it? What's my play now that I have my offer and my letter?
I can't guarantee that every agent submits it to their client, and I don't make them sign it. I don't make a huge deal of it. Like, you better read this, because then I'm like forcing it on them. What I'm doing is I present it and I'll send it with the whole package. It'll be the first page of the whole package. And I'll say, I sent over a letter discussing the deal. I hope you share this with your clients so that they understand the sincerity in which my clients are making this offer.
Gosh, I love that line. You can't even be mad at you when you say it. I like it.
That's right. I'm just doing my job. It makes your client feel like you're really going to the next step. Because Jason, what if your buyer says, oh my God, thank God Jason was my realtor. He put me on a portal, but then he actually looked at the portal to see if there were any houses, and he suggested some. And we actually bought one that he suggested. We even missed it. When we got to the house, he knew about stuff. He knew about the furnace and the roof, and he was checking those things out. So we could worry about, is the family room big enough for our family? Because he was looking at all the other stuff. And then when we finally found the house, Jason was this master negotiator, and he got us a great price, or the best price we could get for the house. And then after that, he held our hand through the whole process until the end. And you know what? He even made it fun. We had a good time. what are the chances that buyer isn't going to send you 10 deals in your lifetime?
Right. That's why you do 1,100 units a year. I'm guessing this is the secret sauce.
It's one of the secret sauces. Then add in all the marketing and media that we do and throw it all in. And all of my agents do this. And we get referred because we did a good job at the practice of real estate. So you asked earlier on this airy-fairy thing. I don't think it's airy-fairy at all. I think it's showing that you're the right realtor to represent them, to get them the best deal, to handhold them through the deal, to be the professional that they can rely on, that sometimes they don't have that experience with some realtors. And so, in my opinion, negotiations is the one area that you can best show your worth because it's where the numbers are.
I asked you at the beginning of the show this rhetorical question. Are you a good negotiator? And then how would anybody know? And I want to bring it up again because I think it's so overlooked in the industry. We take negotiation far too often for granted. And because we've done it more than the average person, because we do it every time we represent somebody, we just simply ordain ourselves experts. But I want to ask you a slightly different question. What's the way that you're communicating to your customers that you're an expert negotiator? And what tangible proof do they have that you are? You see, what Mike is saying is genius, as every guest always is. The brilliance here is that he's taken something that people take for granted and he's wrapped a model around it. And he can sit down and articulate this with his clients or with people that he's trying to convince to be his clients. When he says, I'm a great negotiator and here's how I do it, boom, that's the moment that this becomes tangible and magical. That's the moment that he wins. It's not enough just to think you're good at it. These days, friends, you got to prove it. And that's called value. I think that's so sage. And then you take the testimonials and the success stories. And man, nobody outmarkets you. I've driven through Ohio. You can't get away from you once you hit that state, Mike, just so you know. You're marketing the proof of the value that you're offering.
Correct. So in my listing presentations, I always talk about that guy that I got $45,000 off in multiple offers. I use that call saying, could you list my house because you were a much better realtor? I use that in my listing presentation. So take some success stories from great negotiations and then use it and say, this is what I can do.
You know, Gary told me, he said, Jason, stories are effective because they allow you to make a point without being pointed.
Oh, interesting. I like that.
And I think that's so right because it allows you to get to whatever point you're making through an amazingly entertainment way. And people are hardwired to remember stories more than facts.
Absolutely.
Because I can't tell you, I'm thinking about my experience and how many times I've received an offer. The majority, the vast majority, there is no explanation, there is no letter, and there are no facts. So I'm simply left going and either trying to create the case for them to even be able to explain the rationale to my client, or it just goes left unexplained.
Because you get an email with a contract and said, hey, Mike, wow, it'd be great to do a deal with you. I've heard a lot about you. This will be great. Let's get this one done. That is not negotiations.
No, that's exactly right. Let's talk philanthropy for a minute, because I know it's very important to you and it's near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
You're very active in philanthropy. Number one, why? And then number two, how have you tied that to the success of the business?
So, number one, why? I'm 66 years old. I run a successful real estate team. When I'm 85, what will I be happiest about what I've done? And yes, I'll be very happy that with Greg, we ran a great real estate team. But have I made a mark that makes a difference in life? I've made a difference in realtors' lives, and I made a difference in my family's life and everything, but there needs to be something more. And so what I did, I belong to the Rainbow Network. And I developed my organization called the LGBT Housing Initiative. And what this is basically the Realtors of the Rainbow Network or other people. Her Best Life once donated a really nice contribution to it. What we do is we collect money and we scour the country for organizations whose mission is to elevate LGBTQ homeless youth off the street. because LGBTQ homeless youth represents 40% of all homeless youth, and we are not 40% of the population.
Wow, that number is staggering to think about.
Staggering, and it's the number everyone agrees with. And the sad truth is, in 2024, people still kick their kids out of their home when they find out that they're in the LGBTQ community. And that happens a lot, more than you would think. And other people run away because they don't feel safe. And so there's all these amazing organizations around the country who at a grassroots level go out at night and where their homeless youth are staying, and they try to embrace them and bring them in and give them the services. And I don't have the ability to do that. I have the ability to help raise money so that they can do that. In a few years, we've raised over $400,000 that we've donated. We've given 20 grants out to organizations that really either help keep them going or add more beds or more programs. And the great thing is Greg and I handle all the administration of it. So there's no cost to administer this. So 100% of the monies goes directly to programs. And because of this, I have the ability to, sometimes they have me talk to youth who've gone through it. And when you hear their stories, you just know that this is the right thing for me to be doing, the right thing for us to be doing. And it brings me as much joy in what I do as anything else.
That's really special, man.
It is something that I love. You know, if you're in the community, there's certain people who don't like me because I'm gay. It's all right, whatever. I couldn't care less. I mean, I laugh at that. But I'm not a 16-year-old or a 21-year-old. But people have to help the youth so they can elevate and have good lives and the opportunities that everyone should have. So that's just my cause.
It's fantastic. It's very special. I love the work that you're doing. I'm a supporter of it. And so I think it's great.
Yes.
All right. Mike, you've taught us to be better negotiators. We want to invite you to the lightning round. We want to ask you a series of questions. We want the first thing that comes to your mind. Will you play with us?
I'm in.
Fantastic. Mike, what is your favorite food?
My mother's manicotti recipe. She makes her own crepes. Nothing's better than that.
That sounds so good. I'm coming for that, by the way. I'm literally coming for that. Do you have a favorite color?
Blue.
Best vacation spot in the world?
I'm a traveler. So I would say my favorite spots, Paris, Lake Como, Santorini. But I got to tell you, 3 weeks ago, I was in the Galapagos Islands off the coast of Ecuador. And that's a pretty special place.
That's so good. All right, final question. One piece of advice to every new agent out there.
Remember that your reputation starts on day one on how you deal with other agents, because what's important to remember is we're the only industry in which we rely on our competitors to make a living. If I go to the BMW dealership and look at the 5 Series and don't like it, the BMW salesperson does not drive me over to the Mercedes dealership to look at the C-Class.
Nope.
But we do that. And so we have to get along. And so I always tell people when I talk, can we all agree that every time a deal goes bad, that it's not always because the other realtor is awful. 90% of the time is because the client has inaccurate expectations and they're forcing their realtor to take a position. And we have to be kinder to ourselves. And by doing that, you will wind up getting more business.
Mike, you're such a great friend of the industry. You give so unabashedly. Thank you for everything you're doing for real estate agents.
Thank you.
Why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you add this in to your process when you are either writing offers or countering offers? I mean, there's only 5 steps to this thing, right? Number 1, know your audience, which makes all the sense in the world. Who's going to be reading the letter? Number 2, do the research. Here's the deal. I think you're all doing the research anyway, but you probably are not getting credit for it because you're not organizing your thoughts in a logical way and putting it into this letter. Number 3, know your strengths. Look, every buyer and every seller is going to have different strengths and weaknesses in the offers that they are making. When you know your strengths, you're able to highlight them as you try to convince somebody that you're the right one to take. Number 4, facts, not fun. And I thought that was so cogent. All too often, we write listing love letters that wax poetically about how fantastic this is and what a great fit it is and just how wonderful the curtains are. Buyers and sellers are moved emotionally, but they're also moved logically. People have a left and a right side to their brain. Mike appeals to people through facts and reason and gives just enough emotion to bring them on the journey. And then finally, simply deliver the package. Making this the first piece that they see and every package that they get kicks off what I would call an extremely professional relationship. The genius of this is that it allows Mike to demonstrate to his clients why and how he's a great negotiator. And I think that that's a very special thing. He's not letting them take it for granted, and he is working his tail off to get them the best deal possible. That's what I would hope for all of us. After all, friends, that's the beauty of being a fiduciary. We do everything we can to get our clients everything that they need and everything that they want. Go forth and do likewise. There it is. That wraps another episode. Friends, I don't know what you're taking out of this. I really don't. I'll tell you what I want you to be taking out of it, which is these are the people that are having tremendously big lives. And the reason it's happening is because they're setting up the models and systems to do just that. Gary Keller told me that leadership is teaching people how to think so that they do the things they need to do when they need to do them, so that ultimately they get the things they want when they want to have them. And that's what I want for you. You're all leaders, but it begins with leading ourselves. If you're enjoying this podcast, I want you to click the subscribe button anywhere that you get your podcasts. We want to be the voice in your head every single week. And every week we're dropping new content. We also send out a newsletter at the conclusion of every show to make sure that you get the highest points in the models and systems that were discussed. So if you want to sign up, I need your name and your email address. Head over to the millionaireagentpodcast.com. millionaireagentpodcast.com. Enter your name and your email address, and every week that newsletter will be in your box. Friends, you just went on a journey. I hope that what happens between now and the next time we meet is absolutely wonderful for you. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions of the guest represent those of the guest and not KWRI and its affiliates, and should not be construed as financial, economic, legal, tax, or other advice. This podcast is provided without any warranty or guarantee of its accuracy, completeness, timeliness, or results from using the information. Warning. You must comply with the TCPA and any other federal, state, or local laws, including for B2B calls and texts. Never call or text a number on any do not call list, and do not use an autodialer or artificial voice or pre-recorded messages without proper consent. Contact your attorney to ensure your compliance.